Dr. Gary Fetke here from Tasmania, long way away from a lot of you, and it's good to catch up with you, albeit in this format. Obviously, I've had a fascination for the topic of sugar and carbohydrate for a long time now, and it's great to see that there is a growing awareness of the damage done by excessive carbohydrate intake. But one of the things which has interested me is how much is too much and what alternatives do we have. So it may surprise you to see that anything more than 1 teaspoon is treated by the body as being toxic. It all comes down to biochemistry. So we managed to evolve over 2.5 million years and get to the top of the food chain as hunter-gatherers. And we were eating, obviously, fresh, local, seasonal food, which by definition was low in carbohydrates and higher in healthy fats and protein. Our carbohydrate intake was primarily seasonal from fruit and certainly not all year round in the amounts that we see today. Carbohydrate availability was uncommon in nature when we were hunter-gatherers. Around 10,000 years ago, we had the onset of the agricultural revolution, the development of cropping and farming practices. And since then, our general health has deteriorated. The last century has seen an abundance of refined carbohydrate and processed food, and with that, our health has exponentially declined. So I have no commercial conflicts of interest to declare, but I do want you off sugar, and I am a long-term advocate for a low-carb, healthy fat lifestyle. So clearly, too much carbohydrate is harmful, but could that dosage be as small as 1 teaspoon? The bloodstream can only manage 1 teaspoon of around 4 grams of glucose at a time, and excess provokes a physiological response which is harmful to the body. Insulin is the major hormone moving glucose out of the bloodstream and into the tissues. A chronic excess glucose load results in hyperinsulinemia, and there are detrimental effects of a chronically elevated insulin secretion. So how much glucose do we need to ingest before we trigger an elevation in the blood glucose and therefore trigger that insulin response? Well, that amount is around 4 grams, or that 1 teaspoon. To put that in perspective, 1 slice of bread contains around 5 teaspoons of glucose. The immediate metabolic requirement is for around 1 of those. The other 4 teaspoons need to be taken out of the bloodstream under the direct influence of insulin. Otherwise, the blood glucose level goes up, particularly in those with diabetes. Acute complications include agitation, fatigue, thirst, and increased urine output. And I recognise that this is not going to occur with 1 slice of bread, but it is indicative of the issues related to an elevated blood glucose. And in extreme situations, hyperosmolar syndrome for type 2s and ketoacidosis for type 1s. These people are generally ill from other problems, and neither of these states are nutritional ketosis. Nutritional ketosis is a perfectly normal metabolic state that we can drift in and out of when you skip meals or fast. So what are the chronic complications of your blood glucose being too high? Organ damage is significantly caused by advanced glycation end products known as AGEs. The damage over time is directly related to chronic disease, organ failure, and ultimately death. So how do advanced glycation end products cause damage? We've all seen the browning of toast, cakes and biscuits. That's called the Maillard reaction. Glucose binds to protein, and under the effect of heat, the slice of bread goes brown. The same thing happens in your tissue. High glucose levels combined with the protein, and under body heat, the Maillard reaction takes place. That reaction makes tissue stiffer and inflamed. So every time your blood glucose spikes up, you are effectively toasting your brain, your eyes, your kidneys, your vessels. This toasting is occurring in every organ of your body every day with an elevated blood glucose. Previous 3 months. The higher the percentage, the greater the damage. So what do those advanced glycation end products do? Well, they account for organ damage at a tissue level, at every tissue level. They can affect the brain, causing issues from dementia, now being considered as type 3 diabetes, through to mental health and strokes. It is a mechanism causing diabetic retinopathy and macular degeneration in the eyes, peripheral vascular disease, heart attacks, kidney failure, peripheral neuropathy, foot ulceration and amputation, wound healing and the infection in all of its forms, and cancer. End organ damage is what kills you. Slowly we die from the excess glucose in our blood and tissue. Effort of insulin is no longer required. That chronic elevated secretion of insulin comes with an entire set of problems. Insulin is secreted when we have an excessive carbohydrate intake, and as said earlier, primarily stores that excess as fat. But insulin is also a tumor growth hormone, and probably the most influential one. The hyperinsulinemia state is associated with higher rates of cancer and poorer outcome. A lesser-known effect of insulin is that it is an inflammatory hormone as well. Recent 2020 literature has shown insulin to have a dose-related effect on synoviocytes in the knee. These are the cells lining the knee joint and primary cells responsible for inflammation. Reducing insulin load to these knee cells reduced inflammation. Increased insulin increased inflammation. Now, I know that paper wasn't written by a low-carber, as they concluded that insulin should be targeted with intervention, completely missing the point that the lowest levels of insulin secretion are related to low-carb dietary intake. The insulin effect gives a background mechanism to those patients with osteoarthritis having a symptom reduction when adopting a lower carbohydrate intake well before they lose significant weight. I see that benefit every week in my patients. Insulin also depletes magnesium, which is required in multiple biochemical pathways, and higher levels of insulin reduce vitamin D activity. And that overall increases the prothrombotic state with a higher risk of deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism.